Death. It's the subject nobody wants to talk about. The idea of life ending is terrifying to many. While death may seem scary, it encourages us to reflect upon our lives. Life is diverse. Life is precious. Life is something everyone shares. This Teal Chair has seated many from all over, and within its threads is enough life experience for millennia.
It's very intriguing because death and dying are, those two words, they just strike up so many emotions, diverse emotions and intense emotions.
You'd focus on what's really important. I mean, you'd probably work less, you'd be with your family more, you'd do the things that you love and that are important to you and that you want to do. I mean, you might do things that, oh my goodness, I want to, the bucket list, let's get a few of these things done.
So I've thought about this a bit lately, and one of the things that I've realized is when you say yes to something, oftentimes you say no to something else. And there's that balance between doing things for other people, doing things for yourself, and doing things for your family, doing things for your friends. And so if you look at things like, kind of like a target and a bullseye, like it's okay to not always hit the bullseye.
Well, I think that, I know, I would forget about all of my unfinished projects and say time is of the essence, and I would only concentrate on those things that were most important to me.
But my husband and I, we've had many different situational conversations about end of life and what that would mean for us and what our quality of life was. And frankly, we've actually done advanced life planning for many years.
Just enjoying life with the family, basically, and my close friends. And, that would be important to me, living that part of the life that I know. And so, doing those things impresses me and would be great for me to do again.
But having that conversation together with someone that you are so close with and so personal, it is a really intimate opportunity. And it's a blessing that many people don't ever take the chance to have because it's not an easy conversation. And yet when you get into the conversation, we really found that it was amazing to talk about what we would want those final moments in time to be like, including if we wanted someone in there singing or holding our hand and the people that we wanted in the room. And that might sound really small, but to us it was very neat.
Our first interview was with Phyllis, a 102-year-old woman who resides in Nampa, Idaho.
I was born in Atwater, Minnesota, 1915. I had a happy childhood, a family, and grandma and grandpa. I lived during the Depression, and your choice wasn't necessarily available. I wanted to be a nurse, and I ended up working with figures. I kept the time for the motormen and conductors on the streetcar company in Chicago. My mother's brother, who made this ring, and he was 19 years old, and he got pneumonia and he died at 19, but he had made the ring before he died. And my mother had the ring, and then when she was getting weak, she gave it to me. To see my friends who are struggling with health issues, well, it makes me feel sad. I don't want them to suffer, but I don't want to lose them either. And I pray for them to get better, or for the Lord to take them home.
Death brings pain on all sides. People often do not consider the weight put on the shoulders of doctors. They have to not only deal with life and death situations on a daily basis, but also discuss the situations with their patients and their loved ones.
And my name is Hugh Eddy. I'm a retired internist from Caldwell, Idaho.
I'm Kristen Skelhaus. I've been doing family practice.
So I'm Scott Shepard. I'm a family doctor.
I'm Davis Blanton. I'm a family medicine physician.
I'm Rick Bassett, and I'm a clinical nurse specialist for St. Luke's Health System.
And the question is, how do I address the patient who has limited time to live? Well, with medicine, there's both an art and a science. And many times that particular question is more of an art form.
Recently, I've had a patient that I actually visited our home on my own time and felt that it was so important that the family knew that even without the hospice nurse being there, that the time was near, and I felt that the family had much relief from that.
Yeah, it's never easy. I think it helps doing what I do. I mean, being that I'm in family practice, I usually have built relationships with those patients and their families for years, and I think that sometimes makes it easier for me.
But there can be it can be hard to sometimes come to that realization. Hey, you know, Mr. Smith, you know, we need to have this talk.
I think it's negligence if we don't be honest with them and tell them there are, you know, we do a poor job as physicians in guessing how much time a person has to live. But we do have an inkling that their time is limited, and I think it's important that we address that so they can get their ducks in order and their last minute items taken care of.
Maybe even before I bring it up, I like to know what's important to them, what kind of support structure they have, things like that, because the number of options I may give them, or if there are any options at all, is largely based on what their goals are.
One example comes to mind that I had an older gentleman that found out after he had a car accident, he had leukemia, and he was 82 years old and wanted to go full force with the treatment, but his body just wasn't able to get through chemo. And I think that it was just that much more important for me as the physician to lay down all the options.
Each situation is unique, each family is unique, and how they respond to that message is unique. So that makes it very difficult when the planning hasn't happened in advance.
Well, you know, certainly that's the patient's decision, what route they take. You know, if I know a person chooses a chemotherapy that's going to make them very ill and nauseated, and I would feel badly that they chose that route, but still I honor their decision, which is my job to give them the options and the scenario with each one.
And we're all mortal. We forget that sometimes, is that, you know, I can't predict when I'm going to go or to pass, or you or anyone else. But I think if we live with that perspective, or we're in that situation, yeah, you're going to focus on the right things and the important things.
I think my approach to it has always been it's that person's decision. You know, it's their life. They've lived it how they want to live, and they have the right to leave it how they want to leave it.
Watching the interventions be attempted with literally zero success was one of the most difficult things that I've ever seen or experienced as an individual, and in particular at that age. And something I will never forget, as it touches you so closely, and when you think that you really are invincible. So it's helped me think about life a lot and how I would potentially deal with things if I had the difficult news and I had those decisions to make, and how I would potentially weigh or balance my quality of life personally.
And certainly I may have my opinion on what I think may be the best course of treatment, if any. But I take what I know about that patient, what I know about their family, what I know about their values and goals for the rest of their life, and use that to try to steer the decision. Sometimes, you know, we don't have fixes for everything.
I would say in acute care, especially in the ICU, if it were my family member or me, what would make a good death is knowing that I'm getting the treatment that I want, I'm not getting the treatment that I don't want, and that there's a focus on my goals of care. And again, that's difficult to do. And so in the ICU, we're going to do what we think is what the patient wants, or we think what would be generally accepted in a situation. But that may not be reflective of the patient's goals if they're not written down or expressed in some way.
I also feel like that I think sometimes families are waiting for the doctor to kind of say, it's okay to have this talk. And again, I'm sure I've been guilty of resisting that. I'm like, in my gut, I just know that this is terminal. We need to switch gears. But sometimes we don't for whatever reason.
One of the things I really try to do in my practice, especially with patients that I get to know well, is have that conversation way before you ever get sick. Talk to your spouse, talk to your kids, talk to your cousin Joe from Oklahoma who's going to show up and have questions about whether you can get treatment or not.
Well, certainly it's a loss. You develop a relationship just like you would in a family, and as you see them nearing their end, it's difficult. We never should lose that compassion for our patients.
Hospice is home providing care for those who are terminally ill. These caregivers relieve the family of some of the burden that is placed upon them. Hospice allows families to stay together in the comfort of their own home and spend the last moments of life together.
Oftentimes when a person is told that they need to be on hospice, it comes to them as a shock. It's like, whoa, wait, what happened?
I think the most difficult thing is that in these situations, that very often we're not talking to the patient because they are not able to talk to us. That burden is actually placed on the family.
More often, I think they realize that it's hard to care for each other, and as someone gets close to dying, a lot of times the care gets really difficult. It gets hard to move them in and out of bed. It gets hard to go to the bathroom, for instance. I mean, that can be really difficult for a family member to have kids that you love and you feel like have looked up to you their whole life, and now you're saying, can you wipe me? That's a tough conversation. And so when they're dealing with that issue, I think the biggest concern that they have is, I don't want my kids' lives to be put on hold and be wrapped around this, for me to be a problem to them and their day-to-day life. And I think that's kind of sad sometimes because they're the only ones worrying about that. Their kids worry about that too, but in a much lesser way. Their kids are oftentimes happy to do whatever they can because they love their parents so much.
I think a lot of times we have to talk too late. I think more people are aware of hospice, but I think still a lot of times we kind of get that service going in the last week of someone's life instead of the last months of someone's life.
And so when we initially meet with the family, they're struggling with, well, if I say okay to hospice, I've given up hope, I'm dying.
I really have found that with the families, I try to tell them that it's a way of honoring your family member, especially if they are on board with having hospice come in and doing things a certain way.
And that's the unfortunate thing about the lack of advanced care planning, is that sometimes that conversation hasn't happened with the family, and so the family's really ill prepared to have that discussion with the physician or the other healthcare providers that are there with the patient.
It is that sense of the family members having to lose some of that control and wanting to do everything possible, but that honoring not only that family member but their memory and having a better opportunity to have some closure and have some celebration at the end instead of it being so painful and thinking about all of the negative things that can come through with, leaving their family member in pain.
We have the opportunity to go in and help them through that process. And I always like to tell patients it's not about death, it's about making the most out of those last days, weeks, months that they might have left.
Educational background, how much information the family has, about healthcare in general is a big part of what can either make it easier to talk about a specific situation with a family member, or it can make it more difficult.
We know from experience that the longer that we're in there, that we can provide the cares to the family members and provide education as we go, both to the patient, the family, their caregivers, the death always goes better. If they come home recently released from the hospital and die within days or hours, all we're doing is scrambling to provide personal cares, and the family kind of gets lost in all of that. So we just have a lot more opportunity to focus on the patient, but their world around them.
And reciprocally, I think that that's one of the most important things we do in the ICU, is to create a environment where the families will have a good experience, as good as possible experience in a dying patient, and that the patient will be comfortable. Because while we may move on and years later we may not remember that particular patient, that family member or that family will always remember that end-of-life experience.
I think the most important piece is really the educational piece of advising the family that this may be a great opportunity for them to be able to have their loved one at home and give them the tools that they need to be able to care for a patient at home. Because when a patient is in those final days, weeks, the needs begin to increase. And I think personal care is probably the scariest piece for everyone. It's the scariest piece for the patient to know that they're not going to be in control, and it's frightening for the family to perform those cares. And so once the hospice team is in place and can talk to them about what that looks like and the education that goes along with that, and all of the pieces and the parts, the medication management, the equipment that they might need, it really takes the burden off the family to say, you know, we can do this at home and we don't have to put our loved one in a facility for their last days of life.
Dennis Goodman was very close with his brother John, and it was very difficult for him when John passed away. They had grown up together and leaned on each other throughout hard times in their lives. This is their story.
I used to stop in and see him once a week, and he got to the point where he was not ready to live anymore. And so then he had to go to the hospital because of his breathing, etc. And so he had to quit smoking. I don't know. He came home, and a few months later, he did start smoking again.
Just gave up on life at that point. When he come home, he just had given up. He just didn't want to go through anything anymore.
I think with hospice being there, it did help us all in the family to understand what was going to go on.
And they did a lot of hunting together. They did a lot of, the boys and him, they did a lot of outdoors. So he was able to come home and spend those last years hunting and fishing and outside with his brother. So we kind of moved back so that they could be together in that sense. His boys were able to take his last breath with them, so I don't think we could have done that without somebody helping us through that process so that he could die peacefully at his house.
And I was born in 1941, and there was no hospice that I ever remember. And when people died, the friends got together and went to the funeral, and that was pretty much that. So it wasn't giving the person that was leaving this world a chance that hospice can do now, and I could appreciate that.
We got together every weekend, and I think if I knew I only had that little bit of time, that's what I would want to do, is spend as much time as I could with my family, to have a big fun party. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and that's what we did for John. After he passed away, is we just, all of us got together at our house and had a big dinner and just celebrated the night together. So it was a time that we could all be together, yeah, and share it. Just knowing that he had so much love in the house from everybody, from the young kids to the oldest, that he was loved by so many people, and that we could, with hospice there, we could celebrate that together with not having to worry about who was doing what. They pretty much kept us informed and abreast of what was going on. So at the last few breaths, he could be with his kids and with his brother.
So when someone receives bad news, what does this do to their perception of life? We talked to Kathleen Little, a 2-time cancer survivor, about this experience.
I found out that I had cancer going about 80 miles an hour on the freeway last year. And I remember thinking, what do I do now? I've helped so many people through cancer, having worked in home health and hospice and the nursing homes and assisted living and a hospital discharge planner, and I've done it so many times, but when you get that news, all bets are off. I have 3 teenagers and I didn't want them to be terrified, so it was a very brave front at home. I think what was even more terrifying though was learning last year that I was cured, going in 6 months later for my first exam, and I had been reassured that I was 100% cured, you're good to go, you're gonna live a great, long, healthy life, and finding out that I had cancer all over again, but this time it was a little bit more pronounced. And the second time was when it really hit me that I may not be getting out of this alive. It was, the conversation was more serious, and you need to have a mastectomy. It wasn't like, well, this is an option for you, this is what you're gonna need to do to save your life. And I didn't really think twice about it. I have a lot left to live for, a lot of people counting on me. So I knew what had to be done. What I didn't know was how difficult it would be. I really just felt a strange amount of peace that whatever the outcome was gonna be, that I was really blessed to have such amazing kids. They're just the best kids. And I married my best friend, and we've been married for 26 years. And I guess my parents have left quite a legacy of what that looks like. And so if it all ends next year, it was a good life.
Spend all the money I have myself to people in need.
For me, it would be traveling the world, to a different country and seeing their culture different from our culture.
So I've been wanting to be a yoga teacher for probably the last 5 years. So I would for sure do that.
I would definitely want to travel too. I would want to try to travel as much as I can into all different countries.
I would definitely go skydiving.
Yeah, I would want to travel, but the main place that would be on my bucket list would probably be Paris.
The first thing I would do is look at my money and how much that I had to spend probably on myself with traveling in those next several months.
Vacation.
I think I would go far away to travel and study things that I wanted to study before I died.
I've always wanted to go to different parts of Africa. I've always wanted to see the Middle East. I've just always wanted to go all over the world. India, Asia, Russia, everywhere, really.
So anything I could do to make things better for my family and for the community that I value, I would like to do.
What I would really love to do is travel and eat foods from all over the world.
Mostly my family. I would surround myself with them. I have a daughter and 2 grandchildren, and they live here, and then I'm the oldest of 6 and all my siblings are in Boston. So I would make sure that I gathered all of them around me because they are the most important people in my life.
I think I would want to go to a pizza place.
First, I'd clean up my house so my kids wouldn't be mad with all our junk. But I would want to spend as much time with my family as I possibly could.
I think I'd take a lot more risks. I'd maybe go skydiving or do something really dangerous that I wouldn't do regularly, because if I knew I only had a little bit of time left, I might as well do something crazy.
I've never been to Europe. I haven't traveled too much, so I'd love to take the kids.
I would like to think that in my last days, I would give thanks to the people around me for what they've given to me and give back to them, because at that moment I would have nothing left to take, and I would not want to do that. I would want to give back.
I'm going to spend it with my family. I'm going to spend it telling all my loved ones and friends, family, patients, how much they've meant to me.
I would most definitely make sure to connect with individuals that have touched my life, not just my family and not just my friends, but thank the individuals who along my life have really had an impact and who have taken an opportunity to spend time with me or mentor me, who've given me opportunities to be in situations and have experiences that I've had the opportunity to have.
You can't enjoy them now because if you lose sight of why you do what you do, then there's no point in doing it. So don't put it off.
The gift that they give when they touch our lives is priceless, and I would want them to know so that others receive that same gift.
I think my entire goal over that 6 months would be to build memories with my kids, so that years down the road, that as they're making decisions about what they're going to do with their life, that they'll remember me enough to know what my values were and what I wanted for them and how much I loved them and how much I felt like I was going to miss them even after I was gone.
I think just to enjoy every day as if it was your last, because we don't know how long or what our next day is going to be. So I think that just enjoy each other as you can. Don't stay away from each other as long as people do.